There's one thing I noticed with Stalker 2, and this was from the very beginning, even before the game actually released. It was the absolute hyperbolic opinions people have about it. And it keeps going strong even today, as we just reached the 1-year anniversary of the game. We could argue this is an internet thing and not a Stalker 2 thing, which is true. It feels harder and harder to find a nuanced opinion online, and everything feels more angry and extreme all the time, which is exhausting, to be fair. But I play a lot of other games, and even if, yes, gamers in general can be very passionate and intense, to put it lightly, I have to say Stalker 2 has a particularly divided community. Between the veterans that grew up with the original games, who knew what to expect in terms of jankiness for Stalker 2, but still deep inside had very high expectations, that got crushed by GSC and the abysmal state the game was on release. The Anomaly fanboys who never touched the originals because they look too old and were expecting this new game to be Gamma 2 for some reason, which was never gonna happen, let's be clear, so obviously got disappointed too. And that's not even mentioning the Ukraine invasion that had a big impact on development, extra delays, and led to the developers to decide not to sell the game in Russia, remove all Russian language and dubbing, and give the game a deeper significance in general, using it as a symbol of Ukrainian resilience, which got a very healthy reaction from some parts of the Russian community, from hacking and blackmailing the devs before release, leaking early game assets, and launching coordinated review bombing after the game came out. I mean, all of this is just scratching the surface. I left a ton of sources in the video description if you want to dig deeper into all these stories, and GSC is definitely not free from criticism either, from trying to push NFTs to the game to a lot of other things we're gonna cover in this video. All of this to say, in the middle of this mess, you have the regular people discovering the game and the franchise for the first time, seeing a janky, buggy, horribly optimized but really interesting and atmospheric game with deep lore, and it's not a surprise that even to this day, 1 year after release, I still see posts like this all the time, asking what's the state of the game and is it worth playing yet, or to wait for more updates. So that's what we're going to answer today. Let's talk about Stalker 2, let's talk about the disastrous release, let's talk about all the updates and all the improvements we've seen over the year. Let's see how far we've come, because it's been a rough journey. What's the state of the game right now with the latest 1.7 patch, and let's see what's coming next and what I'm excited about. And let's try to have a nuanced opinion, because I can't take the hyperbolic statements anymore. From both sides of the spectrum, loving or hating the game. From the morons still saying today that the game is a scam for some reason, to the die-hard fans hooked on copium that refuse to see the glaring issues the game still has. Like everything in life, I think the truth is somewhere in the middle between these two extremes. So let's travel back to last year, on November 20 exactly, the official release date of the game. Actually, let's go back to November 16, because as a content creator, I still cannot believe this silly channel came that far. I received an early copy of the game to review before release. I don't have to explain to you how short 4 days are to play the game, experience it enough to make a decent opinion about it, write the script of the video, record everything, edit it and have it out, all this in 4 days. It's a bit much. I think it says a lot on how crazy things were probably behind the scenes at GSC to have the press and review copies only available so close to launch. And for those who follow me, you know how absolutely terrible my internet connection is. It took me 2 full days out of these 4 days just to download the game. And to make it worse, when I was just about to finish the download, so excited to finally try the game, a 30 gig something patch dropped already, an emergency fix to fix some critical issues right before release. So that basically left me a day and a half to do everything and have a review ready for launch day, which is technically impossible. I'm sharing all of this because when I rewatch my first review of the game, I cringe a little. It's very naive and optimistic, and I think that happened to a lot of other reviewers. The very little amount of time we had to experience the game, the excitement to finally try Stalker 2, and also the fact that the early stages of the game are very front-loaded in terms of content. You have a lot of missions very close by, a ton of scripted encounters. It kinda hides all the flaws for a while. If I had a full week to review it, it would have been a very different first video. But anyways, let's talk about the launch. I think it's still disputed if launch was cyberpunk level of bad, but it was definitely a small disaster. The game was unplayable for a good amount of people, with severe performance problems, crashes, memory leaks, never-ending shaders caching, and a ridiculous amount of quest-breaking bugs, making progressing the story impossible. The overall balance and economy of the game was completely broken, with mutants being giant bullet sponges, even on easy difficulties, repairing weapons and armors was costing ridiculous amounts, and the weight of items in your inventory was just silly. The zone felt very empty, and the few encounters you had were ruined by terrible NPC AI and behavior in general. We were very far from the simple graphical glitches, jank, and general clunkiness people were expecting from a Stalker game. It was a broken mess that was frustrating to play, ran horribly even on very good computers, and a lot of people simply refunded, or at least shelved the game and decided to wait for a couple updates before giving it a try. I still personally enjoy my first playthrough and was very lucky to not run into any game-breaking issues. The game was definitely playable, and there was a small burning light hidden under all the issues. The story definitely had some great moments with a couple memorable characters, the atmosphere was definitely here, some locations were absolutely amazing, but yeah, all the issues were just a bit overwhelming. The extent of the disaster got pretty clear when we saw the first patches coming. To the credit of GSC, they came out pretty fast, but looking at the patch notes, even die-hard fans, and I was one of them, couldn't deny the game was in a pretty bad shape. On November 29, a week after launch, patch 101 dropped. 650 fixes already, ranging from AI behavior, mutant sponginess, optimization, economy and difficulty balance, and a slew of bugs and mission-breaking issues fixes. It was followed shortly by patch 102 and 3 the following days, smaller patches that mainly addressed more critical issues like soft-locking missions and random crashes. The game was still running like absolute garbage, the overall balance and economy and NPC's behavior was slightly better, but definitely still not here. But at least it was getting a bit more playable, which ironically slowly revealed much deeper issues. Stalker 2 had a lot of cut or half-baked features on launch. No binoculars, no NVGs, no factions relation, incredibly dumb AI, dumbed-down PDA, completely broken economy and gear degradation. The list is very long. But one that deserves special attention, as it was one of the community's deepest disappointment, was the lack of A-Life. And it was so disappointing for two reasons. First, because A-Life is a core feature that makes Stalker, well, Stalker, NPCs and mutants existing in the world independent to the player, doing their own thing and having their own goals, and making the zone feel alive, creating emergent and dynamic encounters. It was a highly anticipated feature from the original games. And before release, GSC promoted it heavily as a major feature in the new game, A-Life 2.0. So when people started to realize it was pretty much non-existent on release, and mentions of it in the game marketing material on Steam were sneakily getting removed, and to the day I die, I will never believe GSC saying it was an accident, like they claim it was. The backlash was huge, and to be fair, completely justified. A month exactly after launch, on December 19, we got the first big real update, patch 1.1. More than 1800 issues fixed. So for those counting in the back, we are already at more than 2500 fixes, not even a month after launch. GSC definitely deserved all the criticism they got for the state the game was in, but one thing we couldn't say is that they weren't hard at work trying to fix it. This patch marked the first steps towards fixing A-Life. That's around the same time we started learning in interviews that the system was kind of present in the game, just completely broken and not working as intended. It had to be reworked from the ground up, especially because all the NPCs and mutants offline simulation would be a giant strain on performance in a game that was already struggling deeply to run properly. So for all intent and purposes, there was no A-Life, and it would take a long time to get fixed. But this patch 1.1 marked what we could call the first steps towards redemption. At least the players felt heard. The game was far from satisfying or in a truly enjoyable state, but improvements were slowly made. The patch had a lot of attempts to improve performance, a better balance with increased rewards for missions, less broken stealth, a ridiculous amount of bug fixes for quest-breaking issues, again, and more importantly, you could still use bread as an armor. After that followed a couple smaller patches and hotfixes, mostly for critical issues that were overlooked, until patch 1.2 hit on February 13, 2025. It was a big patch, sure, but not big enough to really feel it was making a difference. At this point of development, all the patch notes start to look exactly the same. Giant numbers of issues fixed, 1700 for that one, always in the same categories. Game-breaking bugs, performance, balance, AI, and life, pretty much. Notable improvements were with the AI shooting accuracy, especially at long range, no more NPCs sniping you with a shotgun from crazy distances, and a first iteration of flashlight shadows. They were not very good, but that's a start. The game was still struggling a lot with lighting, especially the transition from darker to brighter areas, horrible flickering in the foliage, performance was still bad. It showed again that GSC was pretty diligent about fixing the game, especially because we hadn't had a big patch in 2 months and rumors about the game getting abandoned were growing for some reason, so seeing this patch drop to shut down all the nonsense was nice. But it's also around this patch that I put the game down personally. I finished 2 playthroughs already, I enjoyed the game, but even with mods it was still missing something. The best way to describe this update is that it moved the game from being unplayable for a lot of people to frustratingly playable. Big improvements on paper, sure, but far from enough for most people. It's also here that I realized something I probably knew already but didn't want to admit, in that we won't have one big patch that solves miraculously everything. The coming months will be exactly like this update and the ones before that. Slow, incremental progress, mainly focusing on what's broken rather than truly improving and adding new things, which is the right way to do it for sure, but disappointing still. And another proof that we were just beta testers for a game that released way too early. I wasn't losing hope, but my interest in the game for the foreseeable future completely vanished, and I uninstalled the game for the first time after trying this patch for a couple hours. Update 1.3 came a month later with another 1200 changes and improvements, all the small, slow incremental fixes in the same categories we talked about, and introduced new death screens and improved mutants' behavior and animations. Life was still pretty much the same, half-baked and not fully working, with weird spawns happening around you that were supposed to simulate life in the zone, but that looked completely fake and staged. It still needed a lot of work. Performance was still a struggle, big hubs on the map like Zalicia, Garbage or Rostock were still running horribly. It was starting to be a weird feeling to see these giant walls of patch notes addressing and fixing so many problems, but the core issues still remained for some reason. A month later, on April 14, the roadmap for the beginning of the year dropped, and as much as I appreciate seeing the devs committing to a timeline and have a clear view of what's coming next, let's be real. The SDK kit for modders, only in beta for something that will already be released in multiple stages, was kind of a nothing burger. Life and AI updates would be small, incremental, and if we look at the previous patches, still not enough, most likely. Mutant loot was great, the game suffered from way too spongy mutants still, with no reward, so that would be a great addition. 2 new weapons would be cool, it's an easy bone to throw to players, but won't fix any of the core issues. But seeing stuff like player stash window increase actually made me angry, I remember, at the time. You have so little to show or announce that something that a modder made a week after your game released, literally, is on your roadmap 6 months later. Not ready, of course, but to be added sometime in the future. I was already pretty much done with the game at this point, but funnily seeing this stash increase features making it as an official big feature on your roadmap, as someone who was still rooting for GSC despite all the mess this game was in, I honestly felt insulted. So yes, it was very nice to finally have a roadmap, but I was having a hard time getting truly excited about anything that was on it. Patch 1.4 dropped in May with 700 new fixes. Seeing the game getting updated like clockwork every month was at least comforting. NPCs sniping you with shotguns was finally fully fixed. Yes, it was first announced in patch 1.2, but it took a couple months for it to actually start working. NPCs grenade spam was also officially over. Most people were already using mods to balance it, like a ton of other things, but it was nice to actually see it improve in the base game. This patch also marked the first iteration of persistent life, so NPCs doing their own thing even when you're not around to see it, which is a crucial part of offline simulation. It was still very bare bones, but somewhat working. We were also starting to see some polish and tweaks, and not just plain bug and performance fixes. better stealth again, better mutants and NPCs AI again, especially how they handle combat, take cover, try to flank you, and some quality of life add-ons like better weapon stats and some UI changes which are always nice to see. GSC was still hard at work, modders too, but if you already finished a playthrough in the past, there was still no reason to pick up the game up again, and it was still not enough for the people waiting for the game to be fixed to give it a chance. On June 25, patch 1.5 dropped, which, not only in my opinion, but for the community in general, was a real milestone, and finally a reason to come back to the game. We had a real working implementation of life this time, for real. What you could see was still limited to this narrow bubble around the player, but life was actually simulated for all NPCs, having their own life and goals in the zone, interacting with the world, and creating the first organic emergent encounters. The whole system still felt a bit stiff and needed some tweaking, but life was finally here and working. Coupled again with lots of AI, combat and general NPC's behavior improvements that truly felt real this time, 2 new weapons, the long-awaited mutant looting feature, and tons of fixes and performance improvements, this patch was actually huge. I want to say this patch should have been the state the game should have been in on release. Far from perfect, still full of jank and bad optimization, still a very limited bubble around the player to simulate the zone, broken spawns, and so much issues and missing content still, but if the game actually released in that state the previous year, we would have all been happy and looking optimistically at the future. And Stalker would have won Game of the Year and brought a ton of attention to the franchise, probably. This patch was proof that the game released exactly half a year too early. It was starting to recover nicely, yes, but what a missed opportunity. Update 1.5 also marked the moment I started recommending people who were waiting to try the game to give it a go. It was still rough around the edges, but it was starting to truly be enjoyable. It also marked the release of the Zone modding kit, still in the early phases, but a great sign that modders soon will be able to truly start working their genius on the game with no limitation. On August 12, the roadmap for the remainder of the year dropped, with actually 3 huge announcements. Night vision's devices, binoculars, something that was expected since release pretty much to be fair, but really nice to finally see as an upcoming update, and a plan engine update to a more recent version of UE5. The game at this point was running much better, sure, but it was still plagued with performance and optimization issues. Like everything else, small, incremental improvements after each patch, but never something groundbreaking. This engine update could be a game changer. And looking at other games that did similar engine moves, potentially a disaster, with brand new sets of issues arising, broken things, and months to recover and slowly rebuild the game into an acceptable state in the new engine. So time will tell, but it was still very encouraging news. And as much as I hated the previous roadmap for how underwhelming and almost misleading it was, that one was bringing hope. We were fully closing a page of constant bug and issue fixing, and were finally starting to work on the game, adding new content, features, polish, and quality of life features. And at the end of September, update 1.6 dropped, and if 1.5 was not enough to convince you to come back to the game or finally give it a chance, this patch was finally the one I was confident enough to tell people the game is ready, go for it, you're gonna have a blast. Not a milestone as big as 1.5 in my opinion, but it was the sign that we were almost done with our redemption journey that started all the way back in December the previous year. We had absolutely beautifully implemented NVGs, NPCs looting mutants, new anomalies, sorting stashes, rebalanced loot across the zone, and a slew of improvements as usual, from AI and combat behavior to a lot of balance fixes. And still a ton of missions and quest fixes too, almost a year after release, which is crazy when you think about it. Another reminder of how broken the game was. But even for the harshest critics still skeptical with 1.5, patch 1.6 was the official turning point. The game still needed performance improvements, but was starting to run decently, core features were starting to function properly, playing at night with NVGs with an almost working stealth system was a blast. Life was officially fully functioning with offline simulation of the NPCs and mutants in the zone. Only the spawn distance and limited bubble around the player remained as one big issue to tackle. I didn't review this patch on the channel, but it's the video that would have deserved the "We Are So Back" title I gave with my first review of the game. That's how far we've come. The game felt like Stalker, was truly enjoyable, and I was getting pretty excited about the future and mods to try. The worst was finally behind us, and big props to GSC for never letting the game go and working like crazy to keep improving things. And just last week, for the 1-year anniversary of the game, we got patch 1.7 that kept building on the solid foundation that was update 1.6. There's a lot in this patch, but the main highlight is definitely the much better performance. Actually a game-changing improvement this time, not just a small incremental update like we are so getting used to. Being one of the things that plagued the game since the beginning, it's absolutely huge, and the game looks even better now. Vegetation finally looks great, with much less glitches in the foliage and leaves. Lighting looks amazing, much more subtle and realistic. Water reflections are improved too. The new rain effects works great, and I feel the overall blurriness, fudginess of UE5 is getting better too. We'll of course see how much better it gets after the engine update, but I can finally watch the in-game cinematics without them being completely broken and laggy. It took 1 year, but here we go. I can truly enjoy the story. I'm not joking, I've just restarted a new playthrough. That's the first time I can experience this cutscene properly, and the lighting is beautiful. Overall, I used to run everything on low, now I can run everything on medium for the same performance, so I'd say that's a pretty nice boost. We got a new master difficulty and a new game mod, Expedition, which is the same spirit of the campfire save from Anomaly, where you can't save scum your way through the game anymore and makes things a bit more challenging. The two paired together are definitely aimed at people looking for a real challenge. Right now in Expedition mode you can only save in town or during key moments of the questline, which is a bit too limited. They should really add the literal campfire save and we'll be good to go. The LI feels better, much more active. The new faction territory control features probably plays a big role in it, with factions regularly trying to take control of more locations, which leads to more fights in general. The zone truly feels alive, a bit too much sometimes. There's a lot of stuff happening now. Persistence works, it's nice to see guys fighting mutants, patrolling areas, fighting and controlling checkpoints, looting bodies, and meeting them back later on a patrol later or in town, or just dead, killed by another encounter. It still needs some tweaking, but honestly now it's just the active bubble around the player that needs to be improved, and we're good. Life is truly starting to feel great and organic, we're almost there. There's also better mod support with easier way to identify issues and conflicts when using a lot of them, which shows again how much GSC is doing for modders, which is amazing. Modding has always been a pillar of the Stalker community and probably why we're here today, so it's always really nice to see. The patch also had a ton of bug fixes, still I'm curious if one day we'll see the end of this. And this patch is not perfect, of course. I got random crashes pretty often, which is actually a first, never happened to me before. I'm reviewing the patch on a completely unmodded version of the game, obviously, so it's not from mods. Everything is still a bit smudgy and shimmering all the time, especially on lower settings that I have to use on my potato, so graphics and performance are definitely getting immensely better, but there's still room for improvements. Completely removing the blur in the options, like I like to do, will start doing this weird screen tearing thing, so that's not an option right now. Lumen is still kinda broken, it might be even worse this patch actually. I mean, I look at this, that's what we have to deal right now, so I really hope it's finally gonna get solved at some point. There's also some much bigger bugs that seeped through the cracks for some reason. For example, artifacts spawning underground right now, so it's getting very hard to artifact hunt. I still don't understand how big game-breaking bugs like this can make it to an official release on a big patch like this, but here we are. NPCs can still be very dumb, and their passing is still a bit broken, and they will still block you at the doors, things like this, but overall it still needs some improvement, but it's much more acceptable level of jank, let's say. And the game is really fun to play now. I'm getting excited for the future again. Well, I'm getting excited about the game right now already. I will do my third playthrough, finally, after like 6 months of waiting, and explore new areas or the story and different choices I haven't made so far, and I can't wait to see the engine update. What, 2.0 will be the last stages of the modding kit for modders, so they can really truly go wild. What the next roadmap will look like, the DLCs, maybe finally some form of free play in the future, but we are so back. This was a long, painful road that's still not over, but the wait was well worth it. And if you were still waiting till today to try the game, if patch 1.5 and 1.6, which were huge milestones, were not enough for you, 1.7 has everything the game was still missing. If you're not happy to play the game and optimistic for the future with patch 1.7, then this game will never cut it for you and just go play something else. Okay, this video was way too long already and I want to go back to the game. Get out of here.